Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pass the Aux Cord, a channel with a lot of heart, soul, and questionable morals. And today we're going to be taking a look at another entry on the Rolling Stone Top 500 Albums of All Time list. This one being number 495 on the list, being Boyz II Men semi-self-titled album called 2. Now, I've started the last few of these off saying something like, oh, this is a total blind spot in music for me, I'm not really familiar with this, or like this just doesn't really match up with my current tastes, and so I haven't listened to something like this before. Now, I went into this album thinking that absolutely wasn't going to be the case because the name, familiarity, and everything, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, I mean, this is really right in my comfort zone. And then upon listening to it, I realized the fact that Bono is not, in fact, a member of Boyz II Men. These bands occupied the same space in my mind, and I'm not sure at all why. I have to imagine the fact that they were both big in the 90s and have the 2. This is not U2, but it still ended up kind of hitting some familiar sounds for me. I mean, really, this isn't something too terribly unexpected for me, and I even ended up pretty firmly recognizing a couple of songs on here, so definitely something a little bit I'm more grounded on and sounds familiar to me. Probably will to you as well, assuming that you're of the similar music taste to mine and similar part of the world to mine. Naturally, this is the case, given that Boyz II Men seems to be one of the most popular examples of the R&B sound that was very popular during this 90s time period. And iconic is definitely a word that comes to mind when listening to pretty much all of this album, but those songs that I recognize in particular being big kind of staple songs that you just hear pretty frequently in passing, but iconic just in general with the sound they portray. And another word that comes to mind is perfection, to be honest with you. This whole damn album sounds pretty much perfect for what they're trying to capture. The most front and center noticeable thing about the album that's going to stand out and stick with you are the vocals. So much so that sometimes it's the only thing that you're actually hearing. And the members have such excellent talent and skill in singing that it leaves hardly no room for error whatsoever. The band at the time that this album was recorded consisted of Nathan and Wanya Morris, Sean Stockman, and Michael McCary, all of which have contributions vocally to the album. McCary as bass, Morris as baritone, and Wanya and Stockman being tenors. You'll usually hear not just one, but any combination of the four members singing at any given point, sometimes all four simultaneously, and the results are pretty stunning. Certain moments on the album, including for an entire song on the closer, again, are completely a cappella, and during those sections, you get to see just how great of vocalists all of the members are, and it's pretty stunning, again. And beyond just having great sounding voices, what they actually do with those voices is equally fantastic. Every one of these songs has a chorus that I can see easily getting stuck in my head, and not in a bad way. This whole album is just so catchy. Every song has a chorus that's pretty great and well executed. I really appreciated the melodies on the verses and choruses that they brought forward that way. And while the vocals are absolutely the main selling point for the album's appeal, there's not really much bad I can say about the rest of it either, and any other elements are, again, near perfect. That being said, it doesn't seem like it's exactly shooting for something experimental or innovative in any way, because most of what you're going to be getting into as far as the palette of songs themselves, the variety of tones they're taking from, and the instruments they're using to record this album are not going to be very unexpected. It sounds pretty much as you'd expect for an R&B album of this time, and a pretty damn good version of it. Most of the instruments you're going to be hearing on here are piano and percussion, and both of them sound excellent. I feel like I end up saying this a lot, especially lately for whatever reason, but I am a big picky guy about how percussion is mixed, and this album does it perfectly. So again, awesome. The percussion on here sounds great, does not detract in any way. In fact, greatly enhances the experience to have this steady drum line going on through each track. I can't even necessarily tell you if the drums are digital or actually being played live most of the time. If they're being played live, great job, good stuff, love it all around. They were mixed in very nicely. If they are digital and programmed, they're not real drums happening in here and it's just all based on the production, this should be a masterclass in how to do it. I don't know why all the way back in the 90s we had percussion sounding this good, while now I listen to mainstream trap music and a lot of the time, the hi-hats are stabbing me in the ears. Also filling out a lot of the instrumentals, you'll find some bouncy but nocturnal sounding synthesizers, some jazz-influenced instrumentation, some snaps, and some really interesting sampling choices, whether it be like a vocal snippet or anything else in general. I will reiterate that it's mostly pretty predictable, but there are a few moments that deviate, and I think the results are a little varied on these cuts, but sometimes it's good, sometimes not as good as the other songs, but still good. Water Runs Dry and You Know have some alternative appeal brought on by more emphasis on the guitar implementations as well as the way the chorus is hit on those ones. And the production on the intro specifically has more of a hip-hop feel to it. And the final thing that I guess needs mentioning is the lyricism, because I do feel that it's the least prioritized thing here, but I feel like it needs to be covered. That's not to say it's necessarily good or bad, just kind of neutral. They need something to sing about, so they're singing about something. I say that mostly because everything is extremely forthcoming. You can pretty much read the titles of any of these songs and you already know exactly what it's going to be about. It's pretty simple stuff, pretty decently written for what it is though. I will say they have this overwhelming tone of classiness to the way everything is phrased, which was kind of nice, kind of unique. The topics mostly range from falling in love, making love, and falling out of love, with a couple of breakup or loneliness type songs, with a few exceptions again sprinkled throughout. I will mention as well that there seems to be an overarching concept to everything, and it does fit into the band's actual name and give a little bit of an explanation on it. There seems to be themes, especially on the interlude, it's emphasized a bit more, where it's talking about maturing into adulthood, possibly mostly just in the fact that this album talks a lot about taking relationships more seriously or feeling things more passionately. And considering the fact that that is only really present on the interlude song, that much focus at all is made upon that, I feel like that concept isn't very well fleshed out, if it was intended at all, but it is like there's some sort of narrative kind of pressing through the album. Now we're moving on to the favorites and least favorites. The first one here I'll mention is also the opener to the album, titled Thank You. Really love this one. Really great way to start it off. This one is the one where I said before it's a bit of an exception to the rule because it has a sort of hip-hop leaning beat on it as opposed to the R&B and soul focus instrumentals on the other songs that sound a little bit more palatable to that genre. This one's very crisp, very clean, nice drumming on it, and absolutely fantastic vocals. They really display a lot of passion, which is very fitting for the theme of the song because this seems to be a very passionate love song with the way that it's written. I think it's super nice. I think it's sweet. It's so nicely produced all around too that I hardly notice that it does in fact drag its feet a little bit and get a bit too lengthy. Hopping down to another favorite on track 4, Vibin'. Interestingly enough, I didn't realize that people used vibe as a verb. Any more recently than like the 2010s, but I guess I'm glad to know now that that has just been a thing. I don't know, that just caught me off guard. But anyways, the tone of this song is a really cool one as well. Does make me vibe, so mission accomplished. I liked what they did with whispers on this. There's certain moments with like whispers or spoken word stuff that don't really hit that well for me, but what's done with it here is really cool. It's got a really bouncy feel, this song in its entirety, and the chorus on it is super slick. Again, little bit too long, but don't notice because vibing with the vibin' song. Yeah. Track 6, Jezebel, actually ended up being one of my least favorites, and I feel like that's an astonishingly hot take, so you guys will have to let me know if that's the case or not, but I guess I just didn't rock with this one all that much. This is an example of whispers in contrast not working as well for me, and I guess I felt like the flows and melodies being placed down on this song just weren't as clean and smooth and well-fitting as the rest of the album overall. I'm not really sure why that is, it just felt like it didn't get in its groove quite as much. But there's still moments on this song, like I like the bridge on it, but it was a little bit too short, and there's certain lines that still sound nice. It's got a nice drum beat to it too, so definitely not without merit. Another favorite for me comes in track 8, Trying Times. This one feels like it almost could be a sequel to that opening song on here. I would call it the second best love song on the album, and that's a pretty close race. There's a very chill, nice flow to this song, and the piano on it works great. This one is beautifully paced and performed. I don't have any problems whatsoever with how it's structured, and the acapella send-off on it is just perfect. Hopping directly down here, and we're going to be doing that for a second, we have track 9, I'll Make Love to You, which is the hit on the album, and I think it is for quite good reason. This is a smooth, sexy love-making song, as the title would imply. The vocals on this one, while good through the entire album, are extraordinarily passionate. And I guess maybe this was just more common in previous eras, but it is interesting change of pace to see a song about more sexual themes that's this classy. The hoes have never been less scared. If we have a hoe scaringometer, it's all the way at the bottom, man. As I'm sure you would expect, this is one of the songs that I immediately recognized upon hearing it, and this just feels like the R&B song to me. It's just so definitive of the genre, and it feels like the sound that's immediately going to come to your mind. Track 10, immediately following it, I think is probably the second biggest song from the album, and again, one of the two that I immediately recognized, and again, for good reason. This one is chill, somber, heavy on the piano, has some interesting synth additions as well though, and rather than being about the more positive sides of love as some of my other favorites have been, out of the breakup or struggling relationship songs, I definitely feel this is quite easily the best one. There's a very passionate pre-chorus that leads into an extremely soulful chorus that is still very catchy. This one's just got a good vibe to it all around, especially out of the somber cuts on the album. And this one feels the most justified in its somewhat excessive length. I think this one pushes the 6-minute mark, maybe even passes it, but it doesn't feel like it drags its feet at all. However, not the same can be said for the one immediately after this. Again, we're kind of going in a row here. Track 11. In the same way that Trying Times seems like it could be a sequel to Thank You, this one feels like it could be a sequel to I'll Make Love to You. But this time, the follow-up pales in comparison. It's usually quite smooth on the vocals, but there's some spoken word stuff on this that just did not hit for me. There's some nice heavy bass on this one, and it is still a very vibey song overall. And I know that it would hit different if I listened to it on its own rather than just on this album. Because while I don't love it just on its own merit as much as most of the songs here, I, at this point in the listen, am getting a little bit exhausted by it, just because a lot of these songs sound so familiar to each other, and this one's particularly long, so it's pretty much just a lot of reiterating of stuff that I've heard done better earlier in the project. And then it does have a really nice transition that goes into track 12, Water Runs Dry, which unfortunately, again, is kind of a least favorite for me. Just because aesthetically, this one's a bit odd. The guitars used here in the intro just kind of strike an entirely different palette that's strangely out of place. But I will say that out of the least favorites, I can definitely vibe with this one the most. Just because it gets in its groove later, and it ends up being pretty likable, despite the fact that it starts a little off. But it's then all made justified by the closer, Yesterday. I've already mentioned this one as being the acapella send-off, and an entirely acapella track from these guys is just a blessing because they sound so good, as well as the sentimental tone to this one overall. And there's kind of a sentimental tone to the album as a whole, but particularly this song. And after glancing through that track list, you probably are aware of my only real significant problem with this album, that being the length of not only the entire project, but each song on its own individually, usually pushing the 4 to 5 minute mark, if not more. Those 3-minute songs feel like a blessing just because they give you a bit of a reprieve from really spaced out pacing that kind of just doesn't feel exciting a lot of the time. I don't know, it could just be my Zoomer TikTok deep fried internet brain talking, but I just don't have the patience for it if I sit down and do a focused listen of all of it all at once. But then again, I mean, we're pushing really close to an hour of runtime with the album as a whole, and I feel like my critique of this is just fair in that it is just too much music all in one place. I think that easily some of those least favorite cuts that I placed down could have just been trimmed off of the album. I think there's songs that could have lived well on their own as just singles too. Like, as good of a song as I'll Make Love to You is, does it necessarily fit or need to be here? I mean, I'm absolutely happy that it was released and that it exists because it's a great song. Just don't know if some of these necessarily needed to all be on the same album just for the sake of it having a little bit more brevity to it. But in an album where really all I can critique about it is that there's too much music, you know, you have something pretty good. Because I mean, hey, if it's good, why not just have seconds, right? At some point, I get a little bit full, but if you want more, there's a lot of it. It's just such a well-executed, well-performed, well-produced version of this sound. If you are into the way this album sounds, it's pretty much all you could ask for. When everything just sounds this nice, I'm so tempted to just be poking at, calling it a perfect album, but unfortunately those flaws are just a little bit glaring for me when I listen to the album as an entire piece. I just can't say enough how great the musicianship here is, though. So overall, I'm feeling an 82% on the actual score, and I think that it absolutely belongs on the list. I would not have it any other way. Honestly, if it's this good, I don't really know what else we're getting into because I don't know a ton of R&B, especially not any like classic R&B. So there could be albums that are even better later down the line. So I can't necessarily say if it deserves to be higher, but I want to say that it does, just because it really perfectly captures an era and a sound and does it with practically no flaws at all. This album manages to smell like the 90s without stinking of the 90s. From the cover art to the sentimental tone of everything, it just feels like that era to me, but in a nostalgic way, not an outdated way. And capturing an era seems like a perfectly justifiable reason to put something on here. So that just about wraps it up for this one, because that is all of my thoughts on the album. I do want to be doing a lot more of these in the coming weeks here. I was getting kind of situated with my flow on the podcast that we do every week. So if you want to hear me talk about new music alongside my co-host Micah, we've got 2 hours of it in existence already that you can go ahead and check out for albums released within that last month. Got another one coming out We do it every weekend. This last time there was a little bit of a delay, but ignoring that, we do it every weekend. So you can absolutely stay tuned for more episodes of the podcast that I'm making sure has a very clean, refined schedule. Whereas this, I am doing sprinkled all throughout, but I definitely didn't want to go 3 weeks in between recordings of them like I did with this one. So we're still getting into our groove here, but there is more coming soon, and more music-related content in general. So for more music-related content coming your way, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, and a like on the video would be greatly appreciated if you like what you saw here today. But that is just about going to wrap it up, and I will see you in the next video.